going to start trying to get everybody's attention because it usually takes about 5 minutes. I'm going to put all of you in my cell phone so I can send out a general text. This is exciting that we have this many people that are coming to class. Hey, seriously, can I have everybody's attention? If somebody beside you was talking, would you give them a little nudge? Please, 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 please. Thank you. Okay.
Excuse.
Just wanted to, because we need to get started because we ran a little late today, and Rob's got a lot that he needs to try and cover as he's trying to wrap up. One quick announcement. So Rob's got today and then next week, and then after that, Curtis is going to be teaching the class, and he's been in here once before, but it's been quite a while ago, and most of you probably were not here for that particular series. But he's going to be doing a series, and the title is So You're Dead. Now what? And I did a class not too long ago on life after death, and I've done some material way back about heaven and hell. Curtis is going to be coming a little bit from a different angle. I think you're going to really appreciate what he's going to have to say. He's a licensed therapist. He's worked with a lot of people, a lot of different issues and concerns, and he has a real interest about this life after death stuff. So I think you'll really enjoy what he's going to do. And he'll probably carry that for a couple of months into the summer. Then I may pick up a class after that, and then maybe Rob will pick back up in the fall. So that's kind of just what we're doing over the next few months. So with that,
all right. Good morning.
Good morning.
I think we've had a lot of people that have been out of town the last couple of weeks, so it's kind of good to see a full cohort back together. As Jess mentioned, this is going to be the last new material lesson of this series, and then next week I want to do a kind of a wrap up and also leave some time for question and answers and discussion and whatnot. We've covered a lot of stuff this spring, and so please come with your questions. Please come prepared for discussion. If you've got a question that you think might be a little involved, that you would like to give me a little opportunity to prepare for, I would certainly not object if you emailed it to me. And I may try to give a little more thoughtful answer. And I'll just say right off the top, any answers I give are my own opinions, and I may be thinking off the cuff, and so we'll take that for what it's worth. So anyway, if you'd like to do that, that's what we'll be doing next week. Today what I'd like to talk about is the question of, does this study that we've been doing on primarily on the role of women within the church, does it matter? Is it just a theoretical discussion, or does it have kingdom consequences?
Can you say half and half?
Half and half, okay. And to do that, to kind of lead us into this study, what I'd like us to look at is a passage that is one of the most horrific passages in the Bible. It is in Judges 19 through 21. The story of the Levite, his concubine, and the aftermath. And I want to give the warning, I gave this last week, but I will give it again. We will be discussing some graphic descriptions of sexual violence. And if that is a topic that for whatever reason you are not comfortable with, or that might be triggering in some way, you will not offend me in the least if you feel that you need to not participate. Because this passage has got some really brutal things in it that I think have significance for what this discussion is about. And I'm not going to read the whole, we're going to read all of chapter 19, then we'll read little pieces of 20 and 21. And I'd like you to look at, as we read this, there's a woman that is central to this story. And I'd like you to pay particular attention to how she is described and how it changes. So with that, in those days, when there was no king in Israel, a certain Levite residing in the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim took to himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. But his concubine became angry with him, and she went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah, and was there for some 4 months. Then her husband set out after her to speak tenderly to her and bring her back. He had with him his servant and a couple of donkeys. And when he reached her father's house, the girl's father saw him and came with joy to meet him. His father-in-law, the girl's father, made him stay, and he remained with him 3 days. So they ate and drank, and he stayed there. Just a quick note. Who's doing the eating and the drinking? The Levite and his father-in-law. 3 days. Now, 3 days is a bit significant in that it is the time of what is the accepted duration of hospitality in the ancient world. So 3 days is to be expected. Okay? That's the max. Okay? You don't overstay your welcome, and 3 days is the max. All right? On the 4th day, they got up early in the morning, and he prepared to go. But the girl's father said to his son-in-law, "Fortify yourself with a bit of food, and after that you may go." So the 2 men sat and ate and drank together. And the girl's father said to the man, "Why not spend the night and enjoy yourself?" When the man got up to go, his father-in-law kept urging him until he spent the night there again. On the 5th day, he got up early in the morning to leave, and the girl's father said, "Fortify yourself." So they lingered until the day declined, and the 2 of them ate and drank. When the girl's father said to him, "Look, the day has worn on until it's almost evening. Spend the night. See, the day has drawn to a close. Spend the night here and enjoy yourself. Tomorrow you can get up in the morning for your journey and go home." But the man would not spend the night. He got up and departed and arrived opposite Jebus, that is Jerusalem. He had with him a couple of saddled donkeys, and his concubine was with him. When they were near Jebus, the day was far spent. And the servant said to his master, "Come, let us turn aside to this city of the Jebusites and spend the night in it." But the master said to him, "We will not turn aside into a city of foreigners who do not belong to the people of Israel, but we will continue on to Gibeah." Then he said to his servant, "Come, let us try to reach one of these places and spend the night at Gibeah or at Ramah." So they passed on and went their way, and the sun went down on them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. They turned aside there to go and spend the night at Gibeah. He went in and sat down in the open square of the city, but no one took them in to spend the night. So Bethlehem is where they leave from. Bethlehem to Jerusalem is about 5 miles. Along what we often call the Patriarchal Ridge Route, right along the top of the Judah Mountains. And from Jerusalem to the ancient city of Jerusalem to Gibeah is about another 2 miles. Okay? Ramah's probably another 2 miles beyond that. All kind of along that same route leading from south up to the north. So it gives you kind of an idea of how far they've walked. 5 miles and then another 2 before they come to Gibeah. Then at evening, there was an old man coming from his work in the field. The man was from the hill country of Ephraim, and he was residing in Gibeah. The people of the place were Benjamites. When the old man looked up and saw the wayfarer in the open square of the city, he said, "Where are you going, and where did you come from?" He answered him, "We are passing from Bethlehem in Judah to the remote parts of the hill country of Ephraim, from which I come. I went to Bethlehem in Judah, and I am going to my home. Nobody has offered to take me in. We, your servants, have straw and fodder and our donkeys, with bread and wine for me and the woman and the young man along with us. We need nothing more." The old man said, "Peace be to you. I will care for all your wants, only do not spend the night in the square." So he brought him into his house and fed the donkeys. They washed their feet, they ate and drank. While they were enjoying themselves, the men of the city, a perverse lot, surrounded the house and started pounding on the door. And they said to the old man, the master of the house, "Bring out the man who came into your house, so that we may have intercourse with him." And the man, the master of the house, went out to them and said to them, "No, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Since this man is my guest, do not do this vile thing. Here are my virgin daughter and his concubine. Let me bring them out now. Ravish them and do whatever you want to them, but against this man do not do such a vile thing." But the men would not listen to him, so the man seized his concubine and put her out to them. They wantonly raped her and abused her all through the night until the morning. And as the dawn began to break, they let her go. As morning appeared, the woman came and fell down at the door of the man's house where the master was until it was light. Does this remind you of any other incident? Sodom and Gomorrah. What's the difference?
Not the daughters, but a concubine.
Okay.
These are Israelites.
Okay, this is Israelite upon Israelite, and what else?
No angels came to save them.
It happens. The threat happens. So what happens here is worse than what happens in Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay? And it's Israelites doing it to Israelites.
Are you sure about that?
What's that?
Are you sure about that?
What do you mean by sure? Sure about what? Can you be more specific?
Well, the guys that wanted to do the people, were they Israelites or do we actually know definitively?
They are Benjaminites, yes.
Oh, they are. Okay.
They absolutely are. Yeah, this, I don't know if you noticed, the story says several times, they were Benjaminites.
Okay.
Did I tell you they were Benjaminites? Oh, by the way, did I mention they were Benjaminites? Yeah.
There was a transition in there where it goes from the man to he on that first paragraph. Was there a change in?
Well, yeah. So there are some interesting changes. So the Levite is called by various things, right? Sometimes he's the master. Sometimes he's a Levite. Sometimes he's the man. We'll talk about the concubine, the woman, in a minute. But yeah, what we have here is this story ought to bring to light Sodom and Gomorrah. Yet there's no angels that save anybody. And it happens. The violence that was threatened happens. So, in the morning, her master got up, opened the doors of the house, and when he went out to go on his way, there was his concubine laying at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. "Get up," he said to her, "we're going." But there was no answer. Then he put her on the donkey, and the man set out for his home. When he had entered his house, he took a knife, and grasping his concubine, he cut her into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. Then he commanded the men whom he sent, saying, "Thus you shall say to all the Israelites, has such a thing ever happened since the day that the Israelites came up from the land of Egypt until this day? Consider it Take counsel and speak out. Now, there's a fundamental question about this little series of events. And that fundamental question is the woman dead or alive when they leave Gibeah?
Was she dead on the doorstep?
We don't know.
No, no, because she didn't answer.
The text leaves it vague. Because some have argued that they notice that the word used here for knife is an odd word. And it's a word that only gets used a few times in Scripture, in the Old Testament, in Hebrew. And it really is a sacrificial knife. It's the knife Abraham uses that he draws, to kill Isaac. So some argue that she's not dead when they leave Gibeah, that the Levite kills her. The text is vague. You could read it either way, and it's a legitimate reading. But I'd like to take a little bit of a closer reading of this text. What is this woman's name?
You don't even know.
How is she described? Did you notice the changes?
So what she's a concubine and what she's a wife.
Okay, she's listed as a concubine. She's listed as a woman,
Wife, daughter.
girl. There's a little play on words that doesn't show up in English as well as it is in Hebrew. The word for the servant that's with him is na'ar, N-A-R. And it has two meanings. It can mean a servant, but it can also mean a young man of marriageable age. Okay? She is described, when it describes her as the girl, she is a na'ara, the feminine aspect of that. So we get this playoff between the na'ar, the servant, his person with him, and the na'ara. Okay? And it gets translated as girl. So it really means kind of a woman of marriageable age is what it means. Yes, sir.
In verse 2, your version said something like she argued with him or angry with him.
Ah.
The NIV says she was unfaithful to him.
Oh, good. I was hoping somebody would bring that up. Yeah, so this is really kind of fun. Because it uses this very odd word to describe what is it that she does, okay, that causes her to leave. And the fact of the matter is, we don't exactly know what the word means definitively. Okay? It seems there's a word, it's related some ways to a word called zonah, which is sometimes described as, just a few chapters earlier in Judges 11, Jephthah is described as that his mother was a zonah, which gets translated as prostitute. But prostitute may be too strong a word for that. It may be that he was the product of an illicit relationship. And so this seems to be a verb somewhat related to that, but we don't know exactly what it means. So a lot of translations say, well, she was unfaithful to him and then hightailed it back to her father. Other translations, I use the NRSV in this case, so that may not be quite so obvious from the passage, in that perhaps he did something to make her angry and she left. Okay? Either translation is possible, but it's one of those that kind of, how you view the story, how you color the story, kind of depends upon which word you elect to slide in there. Does that help? It's one of those where I wish I had a better definition for it, but I don't. So the translators do different things with it. Yes, sir.
How does this justify thou shalt not kill?
There's a whole lot in this that yes. So I want you to notice, we're going to come to some more of that, because we're only a third of the way through the pile of garbage that's about to unfold.
First, NIV 24 says the husband of the murdered woman.
Husband, yes. So is he her husband? Is he her master? Okay. Do you see? There's a very weird dynamic of the relationship here between this man and this woman.
And it sounds like she was murdered, so she was dead when he put her on the...
Yes. And we're going to skip the part where he tells all the Israelites what happened. But it's very curious. His story's a little different than what actually happened. But that's a story for another time. So another interesting thing is, if you look at all the verbs in this passage, who carries out all the action? The men. All of the verbs relate to the men except one. She fell at the doorstep. That's the only verb in the entire passage, outside of the one at the beginning where she made him angry and she left, right? Everything that happens in the middle is all verbs dealing with the men. Now, the question is really, whose problem is this? Who has the problem in Gibeah? It's the Levite and the Ephraimite who have the problem. Okay? The men of the city of Gibeah don't ask for her or the virgin daughter. They ask for the man. And so it's interesting to me, they have the problem, and how do they solve it?
Sacrificing the woman is wrong.
They sacrifice the concubine.
And the virgin daughter.
No, the virgin daughter doesn't get sacrificed. But he offers it. Yes. Now, so a few things. This is a passage just like Sodom and Gomorrah. What these men are doing, this is not a city of homosexuals. Okay? What they are doing is domination and humiliation. It is not about gay sex. Okay? And the fact that the man offers his daughter and this concubine, the concubine is a little bit is even more horrific than the daughter, honestly, because this man, the Levite and his entourage, have been brought into this man's house under the protection of hospitality. And hospitality in the ancient world says you do everything within your power, no matter what, to protect the guests that are under your household. It's a fundamental code. We see it with Abraham and the strangers that come to visit him in Genesis. We see it in Sodom and Gomorrah, and we see it here, and we see it in other places. And the fact that the man offers to give out his daughter, just like Lot offers to give out his daughters, is not so much, while it is a symbol, while it is awful and horrific, it is really a symbol of how important the idea of hospitality was in the ancient world that is a little bit hard for us to grasp sometimes. But I want to point out that this story is meant to horrify us. Okay? It is not designed to be a model to follow. Okay? We talked last week about direct command, example and necessary inference. This is not an example to follow. It is meant to horrify us. So, let's continue. So, the man has sent out the pieces. The Israelites respond accordingly and say, what in the world is this? They go to the man and say, what in the world have you done? And he tells them a story that is roughly similar to what happened, although he leaves out some stuff. And then the tribes of Israel sent men through all the tribe of Benjamin, saying, what crime is this that has been committed among you? Now then, hand over those scoundrels, I'll get to that word in a minute, in Gibeah, so that we may put them to death and purge the evil from Israel. But the Benjaminites would not listen to their kinfolk, the Israelites. The Benjaminites came together out of the towns to Gibeah to go out to battle against the Israelites. That Hebrew word for scoundrel is actually two words. It's B'nai Belial. Sometimes it's translated sons of iniquity. We don't have it, well, it's kind of a euphemism in Hebrew. We have, I'm not going to say it in here, but it's SOB. Okay, it's kind of really what it is. And back at the beginning, when it talks about these guys in the town, it uses the exact same word there too. And what ensues from this is 3 days of battle that inflict losses on both sides before the Israelites defeat Benjamin. And then we get this passage that at the end of it says, meanwhile the Israelites turned back against the Benjaminites and put them to the sword, the city, the people, the animals, and all that remained, also the remaining towns they set on fire. Total destruction of Benjamin. Now, the Israelites had sworn at Mizpah, no one of us shall give his daughter in marriage to Benjamin. And the people came to Bethel and sat there until evening before God, and they lifted up their voices and wept bitterly. They said, O Lord, the God of Israel, why has it come to pass that today there should be one tribe lacking in Israel? Now, why is the tribe of Benjamin lost?
Because the Israelites killed them all.
Okay, they killed them all, and on top of that, what did they do? Well, they did all that stuff, but they did something else.
They said Benjamin couldn't.
They made a vow, and they said, none of our women are going to marry anybody from Benjamin, so help me God, strike me dead. Okay? What's that? They said, no, all the non-Benjaminites said, we're never giving our daughters to any men in Benjamin, right? And they said,
There
great.
must have been some Benjaminites left if they did.
Well, yes. Okay. So this points out an important point about this first verse. This is what we call a conquest text. Okay? Okay? We see these all over the ancient Near East. It's exaggeration. Okay? They didn't kill everybody. They didn't kill everybody and their small dog, right? No, they didn't kill all the cattle. Did they kill a bunch? They probably did. Okay? But they didn't wipe out every single man, woman, and child. Otherwise, the rest of the story doesn't make any sense.
It says the tribe is lost.
It does, except it's not fully lost. What they mean is
It's been very serious severely.
it's been really depleted. Really, really depleted. Okay, so they have a solution.
Well, actually, it said 600 of the men that fought escaped.
Okay.
I always thought it was those 600 they killed everybody.
Very good, very good. Yes, so there's clearly an imbalance of men and women. There's a problem. So they said, is there anyone from the tribes of Israel who did not come up to the Lord to Mizpah? It turned out that no one from Jabesh Gilead had come to the camp, to the assembly. For when the roll was called among the people, not one of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead was there. So the congregation sent 12,000 soldiers there and commanded them, go put the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead to the sword, including the women and the little ones. This is what you shall do. Every male and every woman that has slain with a male, you shall devote to destruction. And they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had never slept with a man, and brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. Now, I'm relying here on an observation made by, we've read some of Dr. Tribble, Phyllis Tribble's stuff before. This is from her second book, Texts of Terror, where she has a chapter on this story. And she notes something very interesting. She says, the solution to the rape of one woman leads to the rape of 400 more. But wait, there's more. Because even 400 isn't enough. So the elders of the congregation said, what shall we do for wives for those who are left, since there are no women left in Benjamin? And they said, there must be heirs for the survivors of Benjamin, in order that a tribe may not be blotted out from Israel. Yet we cannot give any of our daughters to them as wives, for the Israelites had sworn, cursed be anyone who gives a wife to Benjamin. So they said, look, the yearly festival of the Lord is taking place at Shiloh, which is north of Bethel, on the east side of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem and south of Lavona. And they instructed the Benjamites, saying, go and lie in wait in the vineyards and watch. When the young women of Shiloh come out to dance in the dances, then come out to the vineyards, and each of you carry off a wife for himself from the young women of Shiloh, and go to the land of Benjamin. Then if their fathers or brothers come to complain to us, we will say to them, be generous and allow us to have them, because we did not capture in battle a wife for each man. But neither did you incur guilt by each of them by giving your daughters to them. The Benjaminites did so. They took the wives for each of them from the dancers whom they abducted. Then they went and returned to their territory and rebuilt the towns and lived in them. So the Israelites departed from there at that time by the tribes and families, and they went out from there to their own territories. And everybody lived happily ever after.
It was interesting that if you read, it said that they asked God, should we go and attack? And he responded, or supposedly, but then of course at the end they said, how do we deal with Benjamin? They don't go to God. Anyway, I noticed that when I was reading it.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
like, God, I don't
And it's
know. It
interesting
says
that,
judges,
yeah.
So who's hearing
And
God?
it's the first 2 days of the battle, it looks like Benjamin's going to win. Okay, so there's a whole lot going on here, and what's God's involvement is also an important question. But I want to recap a little bit. So we have here a threat of violence against the Levite leads to the rape and murder of his concubine in civil war within Israel. The solution to the concubine's death and a foolish vow by the men results in the rape of at least 400 more women, plus countless others, as well as the execution of many more. And not a single woman has a voice in this narrative. And the final verse that we have yet to read for this chapter, and also for the book of Judges as a whole, summarizes how the author of Judges feels about the situation. In those days, there was no king in Israel. All the people did what was right in their own eyes. And just in case there's any doubt, that is not a positive evaluation. Sorry to my libertarian friends. One of the things in the Hebrew Bible is that the only thing worse than having a king is not having a king. And so, I want to come back to this question. Does this study matter? Does it have kingdom consequences? And first I'm going to point my finger outside a little bit. If you followed along for the last few years, the Southern Baptist Convention has had a real problem on its hands with sexual abuse. And the Houston Chronicle a couple years ago, along with a paper in San Antonio, did a 6-part series on documenting the problem of over 700 victims of sexual abuse within churches within the Southern Baptist Convention. That what would happen is someone would be accused of some sort of sexual abuse. The leaders in that church would try to sweep it under the rug. They would quietly dismiss the pastor or whoever it was, and they would conveniently go to work in another church and repeat the same sorts of offenses. And victims a few years ago stood up at the Southern Baptist Convention and demanded accountability, and demanded that the organization put together a database of these sexual offenders so that churches would know who had been accused and so they could prevent them from going and working in other churches for this to perpetuate the same sorts of problems. And they were told, sorry, we just don't have the technology to do that. We can't do it. It's just too big of a task. We can't do it. And what was curious was the last convention, an issue came up where there was a big kerfuffle around churches that had women pastors. And sure enough, they found out that the leadership of the Southern Baptist Convention had kept a database for many years of churches that had women pastors. But they couldn't seem to find the technology to keep track of the male sexual offenders. And so probably what was worse was that many of these victims were either encouraged to forgive their abusers, to keep quiet, or they were shamed and blamed for what happened.
Don't you think we have to also consider the fact that a number of the men that were accused were in a huge, high level of authority?
And on top of that, it came out, when they finally did have an independent report made, that the abuses went very, very high in the organization. Now, I'm not here to throw stones at the Baptists. I found these 6 articles. Any idea what publication this is from?
Christian Chronicle.
This is the Christian Chronicle. These are talking about churches within our own fellowship. And I only point out the Baptists because they have a centralized organization that kind of makes it easy to follow. We don't have one. But let's not kid ourselves. The problem is probably no less in our own churches. Here's a quote from a gentleman named Jimmy Hinton. Jimmy was confronted in his church that his father had abused someone. And he went to the police and turned his father in, and his father was convicted. He's now become a leader of a support network for abuse survivors within churches and churches of Christ on the East Coast. And he says, quite simply, millions of abuse victims, millions of abuse survivors are fed up with the church protecting abusers while shaming the victims. From survivors who were either not believed by their church leaders or worse, were humiliated, shamed, and blamed for the abuse. These survivors are desperate to know that not all church leaders protect abusers. This is a quote from a therapist, Christine Parker. She's a member of the Grand Central Church of Christ in Vienna, West Virginia. She says, I've heard story after countless story as the victims sit on my couch seeking hope for healing. Often it's been years, even decades since the assaults. If they told anyone at the time, they often weren't believed. If they were believed, they likely were told to forgive at best. At worst, they were blamed and shamed. Amy and I have only been at Greenville Oaks for less than 2 years. I don't know or even intend to speak for the history of this church. But I can tell you that in my time as an adult, every church I have been a part of has at least one instance in the time that I was there where situations like this came up. It is not uncommon. And what I find when I read the story of Judges 19 through 21 is when we see a story where the men find a solution to a problem, that solution tends to result in perpetuation of the violence. And so I'm going to give you my opinion. And again, my opinion. Silencing women perpetuates the abuse. Women are by far the majority of the abuse victims, not men. And on the whole, men and male-only leadership have failed to properly confront sexual abuse within the church. And when they do confront it, often they tend to favor the abuser over the victim, under the guise of, we just need to forgive, they've repented, without ever seeing any consequences or accountability. And in my view, the best way to ensure accountability is for women to have a seat at the table, to where they can speak for the victims and they can speak up for what it's like to be on the other side. And men, I'm sorry, I just don't think we have it in us to put ourselves in their shoes. I just don't think we do. So, I believe our view of women and their roles in the church have real world implications. And I think that the holistic witness of Scripture emphasizes the protection and the elevation of the powerless. And that to fail in our duty to protect the people that are abused, that have been victims, harms our witness to the world. And not just to the world, I think it harms our witness to our kids. And my opinion is that if we give women a seat at the table to ensure that our churches protect and uplift victims of sexual violence and abuse and demand accountability from the abusers, that we become the kingdom of God that restores peace and well-being to a broken world.
Is the definition of need a seat at the table going to be defined or teed out next
I am leaving that to I leave that open. I don't know that there's one answer to that. But I do think that we have enough history, not just in, we can point to countless examples. We can point to the Catholic Church, we can point to the Baptists, we can point internally to ourselves from the things that are known. The problem is just ubiquitous. And I mean, this is just one, I'm just labeling one aspect. I'm not labeling the only aspect, but it's one that personally I think is one that we have to confront. And I'm sorry, men, I just don't know that we have it in us to solve it. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much for expressing the opinion of what a lot of women feel in this church. And that it's time that women stand up for themselves also and not be intimidated by the people who would like to make us victims.
And again, I think I've said this at the very beginning, there was no agenda with me giving this series of lessons. We were not told you need to, we think you should give this. So there's no hidden agenda. And at the same token, I'm not making any judgment against our eldership here in any way, shape, or form. I'm simply saying, as a whole, this is a problem that we need to make sure we figure out and address. Yes, ma'am.
I think we need to remember, God gave us the seat. God gave us the seat at the table. I'm putting together a thing for my mom. She's 96. So we'll be next Tuesday. I cried. And she had a free book that she's done that's Women of the Bible. And I've had all the sons and daughters and daughter-in-laws and son grandchildren pick a Women of the Bible that these pictures represent. And it has been so revealing to me with this and with what I've been doing. God gave all these women, and they were very unusual women that are mentioned in the Bible.
Yeah.
And the comments from my siblings and nieces, nephews, and and everyone have been very, very interesting. My mother is a very powerful woman, but throughout everything, it's always the focus on God. It's not the focus person, a male or a woman, whatever. It's the focus of God on these powerful women and powerful men
Yeah.
who all failed, every single one of them. David, man after God's own heart.
Yeah.
Every single one of them failed Christ.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, you're God's child.
Yeah.
And when God gave
And-
us the seat at the table, and we all got one heart.
And I think
so
what-
we take it.
Yeah, and I think what we've seen in this study is we wanted to shine a light on a number of those women because it's so easy to often overlook them, that they play a vital role. And even in the problematic passages that we have, in 1 Timothy and 1 Corinthians, you've got to look at Paul and recognize that women played a huge role in his ministry, an important role, that and even beyond that, we know from other sources the vital role that women played in the early church. Yes, ma'am.
I didn't grow up in Church of Christ, the Church of Christ. So my question is why, if you could explain why women don't have the ability to be elders and to have those seats at the table in
Sure.
the Church of Christ.
Sure. So I think the reason comes down to, and this is something I've tried to do very carefully in this study, is to look at Scripture very, very carefully and take it very seriously. And when you read the description of who is to be an elder, okay, we talked 2 weeks ago, it's a male description, right? There is no female counterpart. There is for deacon, okay? And it's very clear for deacon there is a female counterpart. But for elder, it seems to be fairly male. And as a body that takes the Bible very seriously for what it says and tries to follow it, I don't know if there's necessarily any. There's not been a hidden agenda behind it consciously. It's just been we take the Scripture seriously, and there must be a reason why it says it, and that's really why.
But you also made the point several times how Scripture is culturally relevant at the time.
Sure, absolutely.
When you think about when it was written, how the culture was written. So you never said it. You never said the opposite, that women couldn't be elders in today's culture, where we have
Sure.
an understanding. It was just as it was written back then. The culture didn't accept that.
Yeah. And yet, even though it wouldn't have accepted it, we know from history they were there, right? And they were there on the Jewish side too.
Right.
So culturally, it could be appropriate now for there to
I-
be women.
Again, all I can do is give my opinion. I can just give my opinion.
Which office are you running for?
Yeah. So, one of the things, we're running out of time. I know we're coming close to the end. One of the things that Tribble does in her book, this book it's a gut-wrenching book, quite frankly. Every chapter is devoted to a woman in Scripture that experiences terror. And she gives each of them a headstone. And for this woman, it says, an unnamed woman, concubine from Bethlehem. Her body was broken and given to many. I think it's time we stop. It's my opinion. Thank you all very much. I've really enjoyed this study. We'll do some follow-up next week. Feel free to send me your questions, and look forward to next week. Thank you all.